Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. Today's episode presents the garden interviews that were the top 3 topics that drew the most interest from you, the listeners, in 2024. Leading off, myself and Debbie Flower, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, have the tips to start your first garden, and we have advice for having a successful, productive garden. Also, we talk with 3 experts who will delve into the knowledge you need for growing what just might be your favorite fruit, blueberries. And to wrap up this trilogy of popular garden topics today, well, as you know, I'm fond of saying the healthiest food you can eat is the food you grow yourself. So what are the healthiest garden crops to grow and eat for a healthier heart? We talked with noted doctor and gardener, the fresh physician, Dr. Laura Varich, about the heart-healthy garden. It's all in today's episode number 373, The Greatest Garden Hits of 2024. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Let's go. Always a pleasure to welcome Debbie Flower, America's favorite college horticultural professor, into the Abutilon jungle here at Barking Dog Studios to talk gardening with us. Today we're going to tackle your first garden. What are some tips for establishing a first garden? But I'd like to establish some of Debbie's credentials. I mean, what does it take to become America's favorite college horticultural professor? Well, let's delve into her RateMyProfessor.com comments that her students left her a few years ago at the college she was teaching at the time. And she received a 100% rating of students who said would take it again from you. So congratulations on that. Your level of difficulty was 2.5. I don't know if
out of 10.
What's
the rate?
I have no idea what it is, or your gymnastic skills. I'm not sure. Anyway, some of the comments. One writes, such a knowledgeable person of the field. I learned so much from her. She always clarified in a clear manner that could be understood, in my opinion, by any mind. Sad that she retired because I can't take a class with her again, but excited for her as a person for the freedom to work on her garden and explore the world. And hang around the Abutilon jungle, too.
Right, this part of the world.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And another says, Debbie is a great professor. She explains everything very well. There were things that I didn't know. I really enjoyed her class. Another gives you an A+ and says, Professor Flower is amazing. She is a plant expert and conveys her passion for horticulture to the class. She is very organized. Everything we did all semester was in the syllabus. If you do the work and study for the exams, you should do well. But if you miss a class, you're going to miss a lot of information. Another says, she's great. She has an infinite number of years of experience.
I'm old.
And I'm fairly sure she knows everything you ever wanted to know about anything in the horticulture field. But please do not take this class if you are simply looking for an easy A. There is homework. And it's always a packed class, so save some space for the horticulture enthusiasts.
Take that.
There, yeah. And another says, a truly amazing teacher, very dedicated and devoted to the field. Another says, if you didn't love plants before, you will now. She's a great teacher. And another wrote, the good part is she's easy. I hate horticulture, but it's not her fault. I just always never really liked it. I mean, really? Plant business? WTF? The bad side is she is obsessed with plants. Yeah, she's a hort teacher.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Also, she says, I did good on all her tests, but the final is different. And another warns, too, to take this class elsewhere for an easier A. And she spends too much time walking.
I walk when I talk, yes.
Okay.
But you see me here. I need to move. I use my hands.
Yeah, I brought you a fiddle wire over there in the corner.
It. Yes,
yeah,
I have to move when I'm doing things.
There's a fiddle wire in the corner for you.
Thank you.
So anyway, somebody responded to that comment that you spend too much time walking and take this class elsewhere for an easier A. And somebody responded, well, if you're into plants, this is the course to take and professor to teach it. Come on, her name is Flower. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my real name.
Yeah, so there you go. So your students loved you.
No, thank you.
There you go. And we love you here, too.
Thank you.
All right, where are we? Oh, the first garden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you do? First thing I did when I established my first garden, because I didn't know jack about gardening way back when, back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. We'll just clear out some of this Bermuda grass and plant stuff.
Oh.
It was a beautiful garden.
Bermuda grass garden.
Well, yeah, I was in there a lot, pulling out the Bermuda grass as it was growing in there. But I think because it was just a lawn before, the soil had never been touched.
Yeah.
So it was just, and I didn't think this at the time. I had no idea. But all the plants, it was like a jungle. It was like a tomato and pepper jungle. And I go, hey, this gardening stuff is easy. Then, like in the next year, I did the same thing. Oh, it doesn't look so great this year. And by the third year, it's, I don't know about this. Maybe I'll build raised beds. And so I built raised beds. And then eventually, I got more knowledgeable and all that. But I guess for the first garden, if I knew now what I knew back then, and I was starting a first garden, and actually I got to do that here. When we moved here 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago, I said, we can plant in pots for the time being, but let's just live with this place for a year and see where the sun goes. Let's see where the water goes.
Very good.
Where is the
idea.
shade? Where is the sun? And it works. As long as you keep track of where the sun is, you can figure out which areas will get the most sun, because those instructions about plants liking full sun or part shade or full shade are kind of important.
Yes, they are. And you can get very academic about it and read about it. And they'll say, there's less sun on the north side and there's less sun on the east side, and it's cooler sun. That's a misnomer, but on the east side. But that's not always true.
Yeah. And a lot of people plant too much too soon.
Yes.
Too, when they get to it.
Start simple. Your point about the first garden, you removed the grass and it grew very well, is I've experienced more than once. And I think that's very true, because the soil has not been depleted of its nutrients. The plants do very well that first year. And I think the hardest part about gardening over and over and over again in the same place is replenishing your nutrition.
If you hear me say feed your soil, this is what gardening is all about. It's about everything. It's about the soil. It's about replenishing the soil. It's about replenishing the nutrients that are in the soil, because it's not fertilizer that's feeding your plants. It has to feed the soil first.
Right. And think about a forest. Does anybody go in that forest and spread fertilizer? No.
Bears.
Yes, there is some of that. You're right. Animals and whoever's living in the soil, like worms, that are living off of the plant debris that's falling to the ground. So the plants are dropping their own mulch, dropping their leaves and dead branches and such, which is mulching around their base. The microorganisms and the macroorganisms, like worms, are coming in and eating that, and then they poop. Everything poops, even microorganisms, and their poop becomes nutrition for the plants to then use to grow.
As our friend, organic gardener and expert Steve Zion would say, it's the poop loop.
Yes, it is the poop loop. He's absolutely true.
And that's how things grow, ladies and gentlemen. It's just the way it is. One of the things, you have to ask yourself a lot of questions before you turn that first shovelful of soil and you're going to plant a summer vegetable garden. What does your family eat?
Mm-hmm. Right. And so my vegetable garden has become smaller and smaller because my husband eats fewer and fewer vegetables.
How do you feel about that?
And I love vegetables, but, there's always the farmer's market. So, yeah, picking, like you said, you need to observe the area around you. A vegetable garden needs full sun, meaning unobstructed sun for a minimum of 6 hours a day during the growing season. It can be longer hours of sun that are maybe interrupted a little bit by some shade from a tree above or something, but minimum of 6 hours unobstructed sun. You want to start small. So you're going to talk to those who are going to eat from your garden, find out what they like, and grow a few crops.
Mm-hmm. One thing you've done is you've reduced the size of your vegetable garden, though, is you enjoy flowers.
Mm-hmm.
After all, her name is Flower. And that's nice, too.
I do. The rest of what I've turned to in my garden, yours is full of edible raised beds for edibles. And that's one way of doing it. I've reduced mine to one 4x8 raised bed, and I plant some stuff around the base of it, not right next to it, but in that area of the yard, right into the ground as well. But I like to plant for nature, for the birds and the insects, and watch them come and be part of my environment.
The whole trick to eliminating or reducing the amount of chemicals used to control pests in the yard is basically surfing with Mother Nature and putting in a lot of plants that attract the beneficials, that attract the pollinators to your yard. And they're pretty flowers.
They are. And I have spent some days outside sitting under a sunflower and just watching who comes and goes, just because it's fun.
Yeah, I do that with the California buckwheat. I sit out there on the brick wall and watch them flit about and see if I can identify them.
Yep.
There's so many of them, it's difficult.
Right.
And that's the idea. You bring in the good guys and they can help you control the bad guys. And that's very important. The design of the garden is very important too, in that you need room to walk between your plants without stepping in the area where the plants are. And so that means wide pathways. And not crowding plants together.
Spacing plants. The number one error I see in new gardeners' gardens is that they plant plants too close together. They're cute. They're small when I get them at the nursery. What you need to know is how big are they going to get when they're mature. And you want to plant them so they have enough space to get mature without touching the plant next to them. Because if you touch, it looks nice when you touch the plant next to them, but that allows water and bad insects to get trapped, water causing fungus and bacteria to develop in the plant, and the bad insects are protected from the good insects. And so you start to have problems in your plants when they're too close together.
You got too much shade, you got less wind, so you have more disease issues. You also have more hiding places for the bad guys, too. So, yeah. And those instructions are usually on the seed packet or on the stick that came with the vegetable plant that you bought as far as spacing in the garden. And it could be, for tomatoes, I like 36 inches of space between tomatoes. For peppers, 18 inches.
Right.
Squash, good luck.
It takes off.
Yeah, it takes off, but you could get away with one. And
you plant it near an edge, not right in the corner, but I like to plant it in the corner and let it go over the side and take off down. So I'm still giving it nutrition in the raised bed, but it's growing away from the raised bed.
Then there's the age-old question, okay, which ways do I run my raised beds, east, west, or north, south?
It depends on your latitude, where you are between the north and south poles. Where we are at about...
Halfway.
No, halfway is Salem, Oregon.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, here in the Northern Hemisphere.
In the Northern Hemisphere, right.
That's good to know.
Yeah. I did this exercise, and I'm trying to remember with my students, I did this exercise, the answer. It doesn't matter where we live. We're about 25.
I think
a little
37.
Further. Yeah, a little further north than that, yes. And we can position our beds either way and get enough light on all the plants. Sun rises in the east, sets in the west. It's only overhead right at June 21st or 20th. And then it's in the southern sky. And so if you are in Minnesota, where my son is, and you plant your beds east to west, then the plants on the southern side are going to get more sun than on the northern. Well, that's okay if you put your taller guys on the northern side of the bed and your short guys on the southern side of the bed.
So there's your planting tip. If you are going to put in fruit trees, you'd want the fruit trees on the north side of your garden area so they won't be casting shade on your raised beds if the plants you're going to put in there require full sun. But we have a problem in the 21st century, and that's too much sun, too much heat. And I'm beginning to think that, I think tomatoes here at least would benefit, and peppers too, to avoid sun-scald problems and just premature death. Give them some afternoon shade.
Right, and your yard is set up for that because you have your property slopes to the east, down to the east, and your house is on the west side, and it's a tall house. So as the sun is setting, your beds in the back are starting to get shade.
Yep. The beds that are closest to the house will start being in full shade by 2 o'clock in the afternoon or so.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's 6, the sun comes up, it's in the sky by 6 in the morning. That's your 6 hours.
Yeah. The other thing too, I remember when we lived out in the country, when I had basically a bare landscape. Okay, I'm going to do it from scratch. Let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. And so I, put in my raised beds, maybe 50 feet from the house. And then about 50 feet beyond the raised beds to the south, I planted young trees, oak trees, some scarlet oaks and red oaks. And
they get big.
In 15 years, yes, the raised beds that were closest to the trees and still 50 feet away were getting afternoon shade from those 40, 50-foot tall trees. Mm-hmm. So consider the trees. And this is why I like to say, live with the yard for a full year. Take regular pictures of your yard.
Pictures are wonderful.
On a seasonal basis or on a monthly basis at different times of the day, 9 a.m., noon, 4 o'clock. And do that on a regular basis so you can see, well, just how much sun does that area get on a month-to-month basis? Mm-hmm. And you'll have a better idea of where the full sun really is.
Mm-hmm. You've decided where to plant. You're going to have to prepare the soil. You don't necessarily want to rent a tiller and till it up massively. You just need to remove all the weeds. If you have the time to solarize it a year ahead of time, that would be great. But that means you're planning a year out. It takes a growing season out of your time, but solarizing is a very effective way to kill not just the weeds you see, but the seeds that are in the top 4 to 6 inches of the soil, assuming you have prepped the soil, meaning you've roughened it up and watered it, and then you put your clear plastic down in the hottest part of the year for 6 weeks, ideally. Times I've done it, the plastic breaks down before that, but till the plastic breaks down, and then you remove it, and everything in the top 4 to 6 inches will be dead. So the first thing you plant will take over.
But that goes back to living with it for the first year. You could do that in your first year. Solarize the soil. I think that's a great idea to do that, just to kill off anything that you didn't want. Let's say you had a Bermuda grass lawn. Well, if you mow it really, really short in May and early June, and then give it a lot of water, and then put the plastic down, clear plastic. It's usually 2 mil plastic. It could be a roll of painter's plastic from the big Home Depot or Lowe's store, or a little bit thicker. You don't want to go too thick, maybe 4 mil of that clear plastic, but seal down the edges. Mm-hmm. You have to almost dig a trench around the border, bring the clear plastic into that trench and secure it with boards or rocks so that air
or soil.
Yeah, so that air cannot get underneath that plastic cover. And if the wind gets under it, it could rip it much easier.
Right. Energy from the sun itself will break down plastic. And that's how I was losing mine. I did bury my edges, and that you're doing that to trap the heat. What's happening is the sun is going through the plastic as sun, hitting the soil and turning into heat, which is what happens to sun. When sun comes through your living room window, very bright, hits your floor, it becomes hot. It's a hot floor. Your cat likes to lie there. That's how it's happening. Now that's happening under the plastic, and the plastic is trapping that heat, and it heats up to over 140 degrees, which is the temperature at which living cells die. So you can solarize. If you don't have the time to solarize, you want this garden now, you want it this year, clear the soil, rough it up a little bit, loosen it, water it, and allow things to germinate. Treat it like it's a garden already. Water it regularly. You're going to get the weed seeds that are at the surface to germinate. Go through and take them out, maybe with a reciprocating hoe. You don't want to dig deeply anymore. Every time you dig deep and bring new soil up, you're bringing up more seeds. You just want to kill what's on the surface. A reciprocating hoe will cut them at surface level. Do it again. Water, treat it like a garden. Let them germinate again. Cut them off again. It'll probably, and a third time, do it a third time. This will be a 3 to 5 week process if the weather is right for seed germination. And then you've gotten rid of a lot of your weed problems.
And this goes back to if you're solarizing the soil, is like I mentioned, you want to water the soil thoroughly first, because as that sun hits the clear plastic, that warmth will go down deeper. The water will take it down deeper.
Right. Water can absorb more heat than air can. That's a chemical thing.
That's a chemical thing, but it works.
But it works. Yeah.
And one option too is put plants that you want that first year in pots. And just to do a big container garden for the first year and then realize where the sun is. The beauty of using, some lightweight pots like smart pots is maybe you don't know where the sun and shade is going to be. You can at least pick them up and move them. Or
put them on rolling bases. But use big pots.
Yeah.
Because the pots are a more stressful environment to grow for the plant and for you to maintain the plant because it's a limited amount of media in the root zone. So it heats up quickly, it cools off quickly, it accepts water quickly, and it dries out quickly. You have to spend a lot more time out there watering and weeding and taking care, fertilizing. The roots can't go as far to get nutrients. So it's a more intensive type of gardening. The bigger the pot, more those problems are reduced.
Yeah, less stress on the plant. The benefit, too, of having those big pots is you can use a potting mix, a soil mix, to start off with. We should be dissuading people from filling those pots with their native soil.
Right.
Because what's in that native soil? Weeds.
Right. Lots of live things that could harm your plant. And also the water relations of field soil are very different than container soil. Mm-hmm. And you need the water relations to be correct for the container, thus you use container soil.
Right. And again, going back to pathways, I would make your pathways at least 4 feet wide so you can take wheelbarrows through without compacting the soil around the plants. What area of the plant roots, as it spreads out, would you want to be, if you will, a demilitarized zone that you don't want to be stepping on and not compacting the soil? 2 feet? A foot?
Well, it depends on the plant, I think. Yeah. How big is that plant?
Yeah, most vegetable roots don't get that spread out.
Right. They don't have the time, for one thing. It's just an annual plant. In an ornamental garden, if it's very deep, I call them gardener's paths, and they're just big enough for me to walk through. Mm-hmm. And I mulch them heavily, which helps distribute weight so that I'm not harming roots as much. Wood mulch is good for paths for that reason, for many reasons, but that's one of them. I think you could do the same for vegetable garden. You could make every other, if you had a whole bunch of raised beds next to each other, so it looked like a couple of long lines, 4 long lines, let's say, you could have a 4-foot path on one side and a very narrow path on the other side of that raised bed between that one and the next one, then another 4-foot path, so you can get the wheelbarrow to just one side of the raised bed.
Did we mention why you don't want to compact the soil?
No.
No, well, we should.
Yeah.
Yeah. Air will disappear if you do that. And for some reason, roots like air.
Roots like air. Yeah. They have to do respiration, it's called. Plants make food and they store it in their pantry, which is all over the plants. In the stem, it's in the leaves, it's in the roots, it's everywhere. And when they need to do something, anything, they need to eat. And so they go through a process called respiration, which is they get one of those food packets and they break it down so they can use the food. Roots store food and they do respiration to break it down so that they can grow new roots.
There is a sentiment that gardeners sometimes endure, especially first-time gardeners, and that's sort of an exhaustion from garden, and it usually happens sometime in late summer where they're tired of harvesting. They're tired of eating.
And the weather is getting less conducive to being outside and enjoying puttering.
Mm-hmm. So you have to sort of motivate yourself to get out there. And one way is the placement of the garden. Mm-hmm. Like you've tangled with landscapers on this one.
Right. When I first designed my yard, it came partially with some vegetation, but the landscaper wanted to put the vegetable garden in a place where I couldn't see it from the house. And I said, absolutely not. I need to be able to see it so that I know what's going on out there. I can't see it from many places. I can see it from my bedroom. And I can see it from my patio. And that's enough. But I need to know that like last summer, the irrigation timer broke.
Yeah, you want to see some browning leaves.
You want to know that things like that happen so that you can fix them before you lose everything.
Yeah, ideally, it should be visible from the kitchen window.
Yes.
To remind you to go out there and pick or see what's there and just...
plan dinner. Oh, look, the asparagus is ready. We'll have that tonight.
The healthiest food you can eat is the food you grow yourself, said that guy. And it's true.
And the tastiest.
Yeah, and the tastiest, too. The freshest food. The next best option, like you mentioned earlier, is a farmer's market.
Right.
And that's the greatest way I know of is to taste what the real taste of food is, not something that's been sitting in a refrigerator for months, like some fruits do, but something that was picked that morning.
Right.
Yeah, if you're curious about what to grow, that's the other thing is visit farmers market.
Or join a CSA, a community-supported agriculture, where you get delivery of a certain amount of vegetation, edible vegetation, fruits and vegetables.
Well, but, some flowers are edible, too.
Yes, they are.
So
I have books about that.
Yeah. Watering your garden. That's important.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be lugging a hose 50, 60, 70 feet.
Right.
So when you're planting your garden, you want it to be near a watering source.
Yes.
Or to set it up ahead of time if you're going to build raised beds by putting in drip irrigation systems and hooked up to a faucet or its own valve and on a timer.
Right. Or both. You set it up near a faucet, and then that faucet can become the source of water for that drip system that will fit into your raised bed.
Watering is not an event you set by a calendar.
Right.
Watering is an event that you set up based on the day's weather
Mm-hmm.
and the week's weather and the consistency of your soil. Raised beds tend to drain a lot quicker. They also drain a lot narrower. If you have heavy clay soil, that water tends to spread out and can cover the entire root zone of a plant. It might be 18 inches wide, that footprint, as it descends into the heavy clay soil. In a raised bed, that soil is so loose that that cylinder of the water footprint, if you will, might only be 8 inches wide.
Or even less if it's like a carrot. It could be like a carrot shape.
Yeah.
If the media is very open.
So don't skimp on emitters if you're putting in a raised bed. Take a look at some good information about drip irrigation systems and garden layouts. One of the best I know is a drip irrigation company called DripWorks that's based here in California. You can go to dripworks.com, and they have plans and information and very good tutorials about setting up a drip irrigation system in a garden.
And you and I use different types of irrigation in our raised beds. I like a spray irrigation because it allows me, it's a micro spray, but it allows me to plant anywhere in the bed. You use the tortuous path emitter that's embedded every 6 inches or a foot in the tube, so it emits water only at that location.
It's a good name for a band, Tortuous Path Emitter. I like that, yeah.
I use the tortuous path emitters in my landscape, but I don't use them in my raised beds.
And remember, too, that the listed gallons per minute on emitters may not be true if you don't have the pressure or you are running the lines too long. And a lot of people like to use that 1/4-inch tubing, which is really small. And if you've got emitters spaced on those 1/4-inch lines a foot apart, you're only going to get that 1 gallon per hour release based on a maximum run of 17 feet.
Right. I did mine at 10.
10, okay.
And I had supply lines at both ends in case something happens in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to run 1/4-inch tubing around your plants in sort of a spiral fashion, have it come off a main line, a 1/2-inch line, and limit your runs. But we're getting into a whole different topic
yes,
here.
We are.
But it's important to know. And that's why, purchasing a moisture meter is not a bad idea.
Right, but you got to learn how to use it. So
That's right.
You need to calibrate it. You need to go out to your raised bed when it's dry, stick that moisture meter in and see where it reads, then soak the raised bed and let it drain and stick that moisture meter back in to the same depth and see where it reads. Moisture meters really read electrical conductivity. If you then did a third test, added a bunch of ammonium sulfate to the surface, watered it in, or chicken manure would be another source, watered it in, let it drain, and put it in a third time, it would read wetter than it did the second time. And that's because it has more salts in it, and the salts come from fertilizers.
And again, we should reinforce that weeding never ends.
That's true.
You do it before, you do it during, you do it after.
I try to get them when they're young. I taught my students BIS, before it sets seed. Pull the weed before it sets seed. Because weeds are weeds, in part because they produce lots and lots of seeds which successfully germinate when they find a new place to grow.
One of the things we should stress, though, that if you are planting from seed and you've got the little sprouts coming up and you see weeds popping around, maybe instead of pulling those weeds out where it might disturb the soil of that new plant that you want to keep, you may want to just cut off the top.
Right. Right. If you never gardened before and you are direct seeding, you might want to put a few seeds in a pot indoors and care for them just to see what the seedling looks like.
Oh, yeah.
So when you go out, yes, when you go out to the garden bed, you know which one is the desirable plant.
And start off with something easy and dramatic, especially if you have kids, like a sunflower plant.
Yes.
Sunflowers, I mean, they grow quickly. If you're looking for a real quick vegetable to grow, and you can use it as a marker plant, I'll explain that. Use radish seeds, because radishes germinate in, 10 days?
Yeah.
Something like that.
And they're done in 20, 30 probably.
Right. But you can use those radish sprouts to remind you that, oh, yeah, that's where I planted the carrots, too, because the carrots might take 3 weeks to show up.
Yes, and they have tiny seeds.
Yeah. So if you want to do that, you can. But basically start with training wheel plants that grow quickly. And the beauty of a vegetable garden, they're usually annuals.
Right.
So there's not that much care with them. Now, if you're growing something like asparagus, which is a perennial, you need to learn how to care for asparagus.
Yes, you do.
I don't think I would, if I was a first-time gardener, I don't know if I'd want to start off with asparagus.
I wouldn't.
No. For one thing, if you planted it as a focal point of your garden, it's damn ugly during the summer.
It is.
Yes, it's just
and it's kind of pokey, too.
It's pokey and ferny and just...
Beans are good with kids.
Yeah.
Corn. I planted corns with my younger son and his friends one summer, and you have to plant corn in a mass, not in a row, for it to pollinate and create corn kernels.
They still need separation, though.
They need separation, yes.
Like 6 inches.
Right,
yeah.
But not a row. You need a minimum of 3 by 3.
Right, a square.
A square, yes. And that's a really small minimum. And they were probably 6th graders. So how old is a 6th grader?
12.
10, 12, something like that. And those boys came back wanting to see their corn.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
That's why I grow popcorn.
Got them interested.
But it's dramatic. All right. You've always stressed that cucumbers are easy to grow from seed. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're looking for dramatic plants that grow quickly, it's hard to beat zucchini.
Right. But you also want something they're going to be willing to eat.
Yeah.
Now, if you talk it up, they'll eat it. Oh, you grew that. You're going to love it. They'll eat it. But consider that if you have a very picky eater and you're trying to garden with them, choose something that you can get them to eat.
One thing that you've always said about a garden is spend time in your garden.
Oh, yeah.
Walk it every day.
Yeah.
Get out there. Become friends with your plants.
Yep.
Check the leaves. Check under the leaves.
Yes.
Talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pull weeds.
Yes. I always carry pruning shears with me, because if I don't, then I start breaking things. I walk the paths in the garden. There are certain places where I have dedicated paths, and they need to be kept open. My neighbor has a wisteria vine on the fence, which grows toward my property, so I'm often cutting there. So just for the health of the plants, I carry pruning shears with me. Sometimes I carry a bucket with me to put the prunings in. But you notice the beginning of an aphid problem, or in my case, the wisteria growing and twining up the plant on my side of the fence, the weed patch that's taking off, things you can deal with immediately. It only takes 10 minutes, and if you left it there, it would take you hours to fix later.
I often say mulch, 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 and that's true of the garden as well, because mulch, a natural mulch, an organic mulch of chipped and shredded tree branches, for example, does a whole host of good. It maintains soil moisture at a more even rate. It moderates soil temperatures as well. It inhibits weeds from forming, and as it breaks down, it feeds the soil.
Right. There are certain plants that will not survive in a heavily mulched soil. It creates an organic soil that holds moisture better than one that has less organic matter in it. And the plants I'm thinking of are drought-tolerant natives. If you don't care about drought-tolerant natives, mulch your whole yard. I have one little, we call it the hump, one little hill of soil that is not mulched in my yard. And I have some California natives growing on that. Things that need soil that dries out more quickly.
One of the downsides of using leaves as mulch is the fact it can kind of form a pretty solid mat that does make that soil just a little too wet, which is why I like to take the leaves that have fallen in November and put them in a metal trash can and stick my weed whacker down there and break them up into little pieces or run over them with a mulching mower, because those smaller leaf portions tend to break down quicker and feed the soil and don't necessarily form that thick mat.
Right. And put those around your plants, not on your paths. My husband, bless him, put them on the path, and they stick to my shoes. Then I track them in the house. It's annoying. So put them around the plants and put the wood on the path.
So I hope he isn't listening, but I have a neighbor who made the very kind offer a year ago. Says, I've got this bale of straw. You want it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like straw as mulch. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it. And I took it. I broke it apart, the whole bale, big bale too, and spread it around on the walking areas and in some of the raised beds as well. Guess what? It's hay. It wasn't straw.
Oh, no.
Which means
it's full of seed.
It's full of seed, and it's germinating now. And if you'd like to join me in the backyard and pull these sprouts, you're more than welcome.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Yeah. But it, too, can form not only a mat, but also, like you experience with leaves, it can stick to your feet, and you drag it in.
I had students tell me about using those bales of straw, however, not hay, as the sides of their raised beds. And the first year you can sit on them, you can put tools on them, and you fill in between with your media that you're going to grow your plants in. And then they leave them at the end of the first year and they start to break down. And then they would use them as mulch on top of the bed and get another set for another year.
We should mention things of convenience. And like you carry your shears with you out to the garden every time you go out. They're probably placed near the door that you normally exit to go to the yard.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's a good idea and a good habit to get into. Some people I know use old rural mailboxes on a post to store some of their smaller tools, and they have it right there in the garden so they can just reach in the old mailbox and pull out their shears and do that too. But have things handy so that you remember to do things.
To do them, yes.
Yeah. This begs the question, too, is how much time do you have for the garden? This isn't a instant, set it and forget it type experience.
No, it's not. These days I work in 2-hour shifts, so to speak. I'll go out and I don't time myself, but I find that after about 2 hours, I'm ready to go in, get a drink of water, take a break, and I'll do that. I'm probably only, at this time of year, I'm doing it once or twice a week, and that's all. So I'm spending 2 to 4 hours a week in the garden.
Yeah, well, we tend to automate the things we do so that you do have less work. But as any experienced gardener will tell you, you have a list of things to do when you go outside to do, and something else pops up you see, and you get distracted. And, hours later when you're coming back in, you realize, I didn't go out there to do what I intended to do.
Right.
So you might want to write it down.
I do start a list, and that pushes me out the door. Yeah. I have one in my head right now for my yard. So, yes.
Also, keep a garden diary.
Yes.
And that means basically writing it down in some sort of book or keeping track of it on your handheld computer, just to remind you of what you planted, when you planted it, how it performed, because you think, I'll just put the little stick that it came with next to it and know what it is. Well, not necessarily. Those sticks disappear as the plant grows.
Yes, they do.
Snails move them. Yeah, they break. They disappear for whatever reason. So keep an interior record of what you've done in the garden. I have one book on my shelf. I have books. You know this? Notice that?
Yeah, I have books too.
I have shelves of books. And one of those books, I'm going to reach for it right here, comes from 1990, and it was just a blank calendar book for 1990. But I have used it to write down everything I did in the garden from 1990 to 2016.
Wow.
In here. And so I can tell you, like, for instance, back in, let's go to January. What did I do on this date in January back then? Ooh, good for me. In 1997, I planted a Fuyu persimmon tree. Oh, wow. This is the time of the year because bare root trees are usually available in California in January. I love the persimmon tree. I also planted a Canadria fig and a Black Mission fig. Wow, you were busy. I was busy, yeah. I also replaced a dead all-in-one almond tree. Oh, wow. So anyway, having a book like this not only serves as a record for what you've done, it serves as a reminder for maybe you've grown something successfully. And you mentioned that 20 years ago you wrote, I planted a Dr. Weiss tomato. It was really good. And you forget about Dr. Weiss and you've moved on. And then you go back to this book and you go, why haven't I planted the Dr. Weish again? I should do that.
Right.
Like any blank book that's a garden diary, it's jam-packed in April and May.
Right.
It's just filled with stuff.
As you call it, holiday season for the gardening industry.
Yes, Christmas time for nurseries, yes. Anyway, keep a garden diary. Do it in pencil. All right, so we've written it down. What else should we do for a first garden?
Well, let's see. We talked about weeding it, prepping the soil, spacing the plants correctly. Keep it simple.
Yeah. At first,
yeah. And put it in the right place.
I think, too, we should stress, if it's your first garden, choose the training wheel plants that are easy to grow with great results. Things like cherry tomatoes. You're going to get a lot of fruit quickly with cherry tomatoes. Varieties of vegetables that just grow quickly are dramatic and will produce beans, for example.
Cucumbers, squash.
Yeah. Pumpkins, if you want, if you got the space.
I did that one year with my kids and put them in the wagon and walk up and down the neighborhood and sell them.
Yeah, by the way, you two have had experience in pawning off excess vegetables with neighbors who have grown tired of them. Yes. Yes. Lock the door when they see you coming.
Food banks will accept garden produce if you have excess produce.
Thank you for mentioning that. Ampleharvest.org is a great website to go to find the food bank, the food pantry nearest you that will take your excess produce on a regular basis. Whenever you have excess produce, ampleharvest.org, you enter in your zip code and it'll tell you where those pantries are near you. You may be surprised. Like when I went to it after moving here, I discovered there was one just a couple of blocks away.
Wow.
So that's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And a good use for your produce and helping people out. Yeah,
use it. You grew it, now eat it. And so it's always nice if somebody in the house is the chef who wants to gather, or you can gather it for them if necessary, but just come up with recipes for all that. And preserving the food, too.
One thing that is relatively easy to grow and that I really appreciate, especially having a smaller vegetable garden, is growing my herbs. Basil is an annual, but I have sage in a pot. I have oregano, thyme, marjoram.
Parsley?
Not any at the moment.
Okay. Parsley's a biennial.
It's a biennial, right. And I get the timing wrong. So if you get the timing right, it'll last 2 years. But I get the timing wrong, so I keep having to replant it every year.
The parsley does last over winter for 1 year, but the second winter, well, it
blooms.
Yeah, it blooms and then it gets ready to die.
Yes.
But it's still harvestable in that second year despite the flowers. And I like to leave it on there with the flowers because it attracts beneficial insects.
Yes, that's one of those that attracts us, the mini wasps that don't sting humans but eat bad bugs in the garden.
That would be something else, too, to consider, too, when you're gardening is don't be in a rush to tear out those plants, because a lot of them, especially the cool season plants that you might put in, the lettuces, the cabbages, the broccoli, the cauliflower, and the others that like it when the weather is cool, they'll tend to bolt or develop seed heads as the weather warms the following spring. And you may go, oh, I better get rid of that. It's getting bitter. Well, leave the flower heads for the bees.
And I have arugula now that is growing actively right now, and it has flowered and seeded around. And so then the arugula patch gets bigger. So I'm doing two things. I'm allowing it to flower and allowing the insects to feed on it. And I'm getting seed that is germinating. That doesn't happen with my parsley. The seeds aren't germinating, but sometimes you can get 2-for-1 punch.
There's a lot of good information online about establishing a garden. There's a lot of poor information online about starting a garden. One of your best resources, and as I'm fond of saying, all gardening is local. Choose a resource that's based near you, and that's usually a university or a college that has a horticulture department or a master gardener program, a cooperative extension program in your county or state. So basically, ending your online search about gardening with the letters .edu is going to bring up results on the first page that have been not only tested, but verified.
Yes.
As opposed to some people out there who just are following the advice of their grandmother.
Yes.
As well intended as it may be.
And yes, you don't know. That's the problem. You don't know what's good or bad, but the colleges do test it before they put it online.
Right. .edu. And .org, in the case of some botanical institutes, botanical gardens and things, have a lot of good gardening information as well.
Yes. If you're an aficionado of a particular type of plant, begonia grower or something, org would include societies of people that know a lot about those things.
And probably locally, too. That's the other thing, too, is join a local garden club.
Yes.
Hang out with the master gardeners if they have a garden, a public garden, and get answers from them. If your neighbor can grow it, you can probably grow it, too. Mm-hmm. That's another thing I always say. If you're just thinking about what plants can I grow in my yard and you just moved to an area, walk your neighborhood. Strike up conversations with somebody who's obviously spent a lot of time in their yard working. They'll love to show you their garden.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will.
They will try to give you plants.
Yes.
Yes. So take advantage of that, for heaven's sake. I'm done. Are you done?
Yeah, I am.
All right. All right, First Garden. It's a fun experience. You're going to enjoy it. Get the whole family involved. It's a lifetime hobby. It's good exercise. And like I said, the healthiest food you can eat is the food you grow yourself. Debbie Flower, thanks for your help on this one.
You're welcome, Fred.
Congratulations to Smart Pots. They recently won the National Retailer's Choice Award from the North American Hardware and Paint Association. It's in recognition of Smart Pots' innovation and quality in the gardening world. And there's good news for wholesale and commercial growers who use Smart Pots. A recently published study by the University of Florida said that the initial production of plants in Smart Pot fabric containers resulted in marketable plants 3 months earlier, saving approximately $1 per plant in production costs, thereby opening up production space for another crop. Smart Pots, they're proudly made 100% right here in the USA, and they're BPA-free and lead-free, making them safe for growing vegetables and other edibles. They're available in sizes from 1 gallon to 1,000 gallons. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers as well as select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. And you can buy Smart Pots online. Just visit smartpots.com/Fred. And don't forget that /Fred part. On that page are details about how you can get 10% off your Smart Pot order by using the coupon code FRED, F-R-E-D. Just apply it at checkout from the Smart Pot store. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful fabric containers. And don't forget that special Farmer Fred 10% discount. It's Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. You know who really likes fresh-picked blueberries besides gardeners? Birds, squirrels, rats, your pet dog. How can you protect those ripening blueberries from those marauders? Well, we found one good solution at the Sacramento County, California Master Gardeners Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. And we get tips for keeping your blueberry plants productive with Tom Spellman and Phil Purcell from Dave Wilson Nursery. We are here at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center on a workshop day in January. It's not raining, it's cloudy, it's threatening rain, but it's still a beautiful day. And we are enjoying the winter interest, if you will, here in the blueberry patch of the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. Blueberries, a great, tasty, small berry to grow. I have probably a cup of blueberries every morning with my breakfast, and it's very healthy for you. And blueberries in the ground or in containers are a great way to go. We are talking with Master Gardener Ann Moore. And Ann, let's talk about all the different varieties you have here. Now, we're in USDA Zone 9, where Southern High Bush blueberries are recommended. So why don't we start on one end and work our way back and talk about each of these varieties of blueberries to grow. Now, usually the harvest time for these is here in USDA Zone 9 is probably, May and June?
Starting in May, and we've actually gone into July last year.
All right. Well, the first one we come to is one of my favorite early and mid-season blueberries. That's a Southern High Bush. I guess first of all, we better explain the difference between Southern High Bush and Northern High Bush. Southern High Bush is which is the easiest to grow here. Northern High Bush, I guess, are the ones you would find in Michigan or Washington or back east.
Correct. Right. And they need a little bit more chill hours usually than the southern high bush.
Maybe not 100-degree temperatures.
Yeah. Though you'll see we've had success with some northern high bush, and I can tell you which ones those are.
All right. Okay. So stay tuned for that. But this first one is one of my favorites that I have had in my garden for 25 years or so, and that's Jubilee.
Correct. Now, this is just a 1-year-old plant, so we don't have a lot of experience with it yet, but it's real common in the nursery, and it's really recommended for our area to do very well.
One of the criteria, if you start growing blueberries, you'll realize that one of the criteria is you really want to choose a blueberry variety that produces pretty good-sized blueberries because they're a lot easier to pick than the really small ones. Jubilee's pretty good size. Next up on the list here in the blueberry section at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center is the star blueberry. Tell us about the star.
It's been here quite a while and done very well. It fruits early in the season, so we'll see this starting in May. And it is a southern high bush. Does very well, very tasty, and I think it has a good-sized berry.
Also, here in USDA Zone 9, we should point out that not all blueberries lose their leaves. Some leaves persist, and the star blueberry has these now reddish leaves clinging to the plant. A lot of winter interest there.
Yeah, they're really pretty.
So that's one thing to consider, too, about the blueberries is, well, does it lose its leaf or not? And if it doesn't, well, it's something to look at.
Correct.
All right, moving down the list here. Another one of my favorites is Sunshine Blue that you have here. Oh, look at all the buds on it. Here it is January, and it's got buds, and yet it is a mid-season variety.
Yeah, now this is also a relatively young plant. We planted this, it's probably just coming into its third year. So we're expecting to start to see a good amount of berries on here. We've just been kind of nurturing it and even taking the berries off till now to just help it get stabilized. And it's a beautiful green and really lush looking. And we're going to prune it, but we probably won't prune it hardly at all since it's so young. Just take out next month we'll do this, take out the old branches or dying branches, but as you can see, it's just really beautiful. I don't think there's much that we need to do to it.
Let's talk a little bit about pruning blueberries. What you want to do, as you suggest, is remove the old wood. Usually it's the 3-year-old wood or greater of age because they get less productive as they get older.
Absolutely. And if you just want to keep encouraging new growth, and that's where the life is in the plant. Your plant will live a lot longer if most of the plant is young wood versus older wood as well.
And when you take out an old branch, you take it down to ground level, don't you?
Absolutely. And then you start seeing the structure of the plant. That really helps you figure out if you need to make any more pruning cuts or not.
Yeah, and that is best done probably in wintertime?
Yeah, we hope to prune next month if it's not too rainy and crazy, and but in the next month or two is when we should be doing it. And you can see there's already buds on these plants, so we want to cut it now, and so we're not cutting off all those future berries.
And moving on here is another evergreen blueberry southern high bush variety called Abundance. I have had no experience growing Abundance. Tell us about that.
Well, we've had this plant for a long time, and it truly is abundant. It's putting up lots of new plants. Actually, in past years, we've lost some plants. We've actually been able to take some new babies from this plant and put them and regrow them. So it's very abundant. It's got lots and lots of berries, good size, really tasty. But I do have to say, I think this is a hard one to find. Mm-hmm. A few of our plants here we've gotten from real special sources, and we really can't help you find them. You'd have to go online if you're really serious about it. This is actually probably 3 plants here right now that we've just allowed to grow, and we could dig them up and plant them somewhere else, and they would do fine. These actually have come up from the root.
What time of year would you do that?
I think either late fall or early spring is when you want to do stuff like that.
Okay, so you dig out what you can see as a new plant coming up and just sever the roots, leave some roots on, but just enough to get it out of the ground and then put it in a new home.
Absolutely. Our experience is blueberries are really forgiving plants. I mean, they can take a lot of pruning. They come back a lot of times after a hard summer. So they're really hardy plants.
Let's talk about the home for a blueberry. They like acid soil.
Absolutely. That's probably one of the most important things when you're growing blueberries. I think it's one thing that people sort of don't like to do, but they need acidic soil pH between 4.5 and 5.5. And that pH is what allows them to actually absorb iron from the ground, which is what they need to produce really great berries. So if you're planting in the ground, the best way to do that, I wasn't around when we planted all these plants that are in the ground, but you actually need to go a few months ahead of time and actually mix in. There's a whole formula that we have on our website. Mix in some additives of soil, let it break down so that you can create more of an acidic environment. And then every year after that, we're always measuring the pH of all of our soil and adding soil sulfur to constantly manage the pH of the soil, because our soil in Sacramento tends to be around 7 and they need 4.5 to 5.5. Now I'd add, when we're planting in barrels, it's a whole lot easier, because then you can just buy a big bag of azalea soil, which is made for acidic plants, and plant in that. Or we have a recipe on our website of what you can mix together of different kinds of soils and soil additives to make the soil that they like.
You have to be patient with soil sulfur when you add it, because it takes a couple of months for it to actually start lowering the pH.
Yes, yeah. And we actually we're going to measure in March. We do it in March of every year. Note that down, and we'll add half of the soil sulfur in March and then another half in the fall. So we're kind of pacing ourselves, because it's a slow release additive, and we just really want to make sure you have a steady.
You mentioned the soil mix recipe if you're growing it in containers, and big containers like cattle watering troughs, for example, with holes in the bottom are a great way to go for growing a plant like a blueberry to get it up to its eventual height of 4 feet, 5 feet or more. But usually they're around 3, 4, 5 feet. But that mix, as I recall, and it's the mix I use on my blueberries, would be 1/3 of that azalea soil mix, 1/3 pathway bark, and 1/3 of an acidic soil amendment like peat moss, for example. Just make sure it's all thoroughly wetted before you use it. That's a good combination to use. The other thing, too, about growing blueberries in containers, does it need to be revitalized every few years? Should you empty that container out and put in fresh soil?
Well, we haven't had our barrels that long, so we're certainly not at that stage. But I do have barrels at home that I've had for 7 or 8 years, and they're doing fine. I do really pay attention to how much I fertilize them, because I think over time, when you're in a container, the planting materials get kind of leached out. So you might think over time of changing your fertilizing regimen and maybe fertilizing more often with a mixture of kelp and fish emulsion or something like that, something really diluted, but just to help keep replenishing that soil.
You mentioned my favorite fertilizer formula there of fish emulsion and kelp meal for a full array of macro and micronutrients, but in little doses, unlike a lot of commercial products. In fact, commercial products, I think some of your favorite blueberry growers may shy away from synthetic fertilizers just because of the salts in them, and they prefer organic fertilizers for growing blueberries.
Yeah, we do that as well here.
All right, now this next one in the row of blueberries here at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center is a northern high bush. And again, the northern high bush blueberry plant is a favorite in cooler climates like Washington, Michigan, and back east. Tell us about northern high bush and the Duke blueberry.
Well, this plant is really, really vigorous. We prune it really severely every year. And if you could see this plant right now, it just has so many stems. It's just got more dense growth than any of our other plants. It has a really nice medium-sized light blue berry, and it does well every year, and no leaves. It's completely naked, but you can see lots of buds. I think we're going to have a really good year here.
And it's an early producer.
Yep.
What time of year do you usually harvest this?
This is an early season, so like I said, we usually start in May. Every year is a little bit different depending on the weather. We were a little bit late last year because we had the sun didn't come to us as soon last year, but by mid-May, we were usually seeing berries.
What's nice here at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center is there's information about each of the varieties of plants that are growing here, and usually a picture of them, too, when they're in full production. And this picture and description of the Duke blueberry, those look like good-sized blueberries.
Yeah, and they're really good. We're a favorite.
Now, here's one And it's an interesting variety. It's called pink lemonade blueberry, but it's not necessarily a southern high bush, not necessarily a northern high bush. It's something in between.
Yeah, it's a hybrid of a variety called rabbit eye. It's the only mixed with a southern high bush. And it's a really interesting plant. This was new to us. This is just coming into its third year. We haven't had many berries yet, but I think we will this year. It's pink. People just love them because they're really beautiful. I'm not sure that they're as tasty as some of the others, but I think it's just really an interesting plant that you see a lot in the nursery. So we just wanted to grow it so we can have an example.
The picture on the label of the berry itself, it almost looks like a pyracantha berry or a toyon berry, and that would take little fingers to pick.
Yeah, maybe you're right. And actually, the plant was taken by one of our members, and that's from her yard, so you can see she's getting a good harvest there.
Well, we knew the weather was going to change today here in January at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center, and it's starting to drip, so we'll finish up quickly here with the blueberries. Here's another northern high bush one called Northland. Tell us about Northland.
Once again, this is doing really well. It's a plant we've had quite a long time. You can see it's got a lot of growth on it. It has had a little bit of stem blight in the past, but we were able to just prune it out, and it seems to be coming back just fine. It does really well, has a really nice berry on it. It's a mid-season berry, so it's a little bit later, probably June-ish before it starts. We start to get a good harvest, but it's been here a long time, and we're really happy with it.
All right, and finally, a southern high bush variety here on the end. Another variety that I grow year after year called Sharp Blue.
Right. Now, this is, once again, just coming into its third year, but look at how lush it is. It's got lots of green leaves and lots of blossoms already on it. It's one that does really great in our area. We expect it to become ripe in probably in May, in early season, and we chose this because it's really known to do really well in our area. It's something that's readily available to the public, and so we just really want to be able to demonstrate that here.
And I will agree with what it says on the sign here. Produces large berries with good color and excellent flavor. Sharp Blue is probably one of my all-time favorites, too. You know, as we were walking through this row of blueberries here, it just so happens there's another row of blueberries behind us. Well, let's talk about these. All right, I forgot. Yeah, Georgia Gem, that's a southern hybrid.
Yeah, this is really a favorite. They're not the biggest berries in the world, but in past, when we've had tasting tests, this has often been a favorite. The public really likes this berry. It's an early season berry. We've had quite a long time, and it's done well, survived some serious sun issues and just popped back and seems to be doing well. It is a plant that's sort of hard to find. You'd have to really search for it, but we're really happy with it.
The Georgia Gem Blueberry. Yeah. And next to it is another tried and true variety here in USDA Zone 9, the Southern High Bush, the Misty.
Yeah, this is one we've had for a while. I think it's actually had some serious challenges in the past because it was planted in an area that wasn't, we discovered wasn't getting water as much as it needs. But look, it looks beautiful. It's just, like I said, it's a really resilient plant, and it's looking really beautiful with lots of leaves, and we see some blossoms already. It's an early season plant and has really great berries. It's one of those that does really well here and is really easy to get a hold of.
All right. And I think this is the last blueberry. Yeah. It's the Ozark Blue.
Once again, this is an unusual one, but people really like the flavor. They're really tasty, and so it's worth, if you want to do something out of the norm, it's worth finding it, but you'll have to search. This is a mid-season plant, so it's a little bit later in the season, but prolific, and we've been very happy with it. We've had it quite a long time.
Yeah, we should point out that blueberry plants here in California are one of the first fruit varieties to hit the nurseries, usually in late December and January. As you go to colder climates, they'll start appearing in your nurseries a little bit later in the year, but shop early for best selection.
Yeah, absolutely. They're there now, and they do sell out sometimes.
Wow, we've learned a lot about blueberries today from Ann Moore, Master Gardener here in Sacramento County. We're at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center, where now the rain is getting serious. Ann, thank you for braving this with me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
One of the easiest plants for beginning gardeners to grow are blueberries. But there's a lot of conflicting advice out there. Tom Spellman works with Dave Wilson Nursery. He and Phil Purcell got together and did a little talk about when to prune blueberries and how to plant them and how to take care of them. One of the things Tom mentioned, I didn't know, you should prune your blueberries after harvest in the summertime, not in winter. Tom will explain.
Tom Spellman, Dave Wilson Nursery. It's second week of August up here in the Central Valley, and we're out evaluating our new crop of berry plants coming on for this fall. We'll be shipping these in late October, November, early December. This is Sunshine Blue Blueberry. Look how nice that plant is. That's just absolutely a beautiful finished product. But we're going to pinch these one more time. We're going to cut them down about 6 inches or so and put one more nice flush of growth on them. All that growth that they finish off with this fall, that's going to be production wood for this next season. That's what's going to bloom in February and March and April and produce berries in May, June, and July. So blueberries are kind of an anomaly in the fruit world. If you prune blueberries in the wintertime, you're every cut you make, you're pruning out fruiting work. So you want to do all of your pruning on blueberries in the summer after the end of the crop season. So when the plants are done fruiting in July or early August, that's when you want to do your shaping, let that next flush of growth come out, and that's what's going to be production wood for the next year. So no winter pruning on blueberries. So this is another one of our unique blueberry varieties. We're growing about a dozen or so different varieties in our Farmers Market Favorite program, all in this 4x9 inch liner pot. So these are 1-year plants. They're ready to be lined out. They're going to be productive their first year in a container. This is a variety called pink lemonade. So as opposed to a blue blueberry, this is a pink blueberry. It's a little more acidic. It's a little more tangy in flavor. And they mix this a lot with other blue flesh varieties to be used in desserts. The dessert chefs love this variety. This, on top of a cheesecake with a couple of blueberries, will make about a $20 dessert.
Last year, we introduced the bushel berry line into our farm market favorites. And it just happened to coincide with, the COVID pandemic. And one thing that we found out, and it was really eye-opening, so many young people now are getting into gardening, but it's a little overwhelmed. What we think is the best entry-level fruit to get into, especially if you have a small patio, is getting into blueberries or getting into, small bush plants and trialing them there. And from there, go ahead and expanding. So blueberries, perfect. You plant 3 in a wine barrel. You can plant 1 in a nice decorative container. And it's an easy way for someone new to gardening to really experience and be successful with edibles. What the bushel and berry adds into this mix is, for example, this right here is the Baby Cakes blackberry. When everyone thinks blackberries along the roadside, they're thinking, the sprawling vines and the thorns. This is a thornless bush blackberry that's made for containers. It's going to get covered with fruit, really easy to maintain. It doesn't get big. You just keep it trimmed in a nice little bush. Its counterpart is known as raspberry shortcake. It is a raspberry that's a bush raspberry as opposed to cane, perfect for container gardening, and you'll get nice, good fruit off of it. So, if you're not really sure about, dedicating a lot of room, start with the bushel and berry line and go ahead and put them in pots. So speaking of pots, right? What do you think about soil, especially blueberries? Everyone's a little freaked out on what to do, but we have a simple recipe.
There's 2 things that are essential to proper blueberry care. Number 1, fast drainage.
Okay.
You don't want any water to sit in that pot. You want it all to drain out. And an acidic soil condition.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that you don't have a high pH. You don't want a pH any more than about 6.5 max.
Okay.
So if you used a mixture of, say, a good sandy potting soil, about 1/3 peat moss, and coarse grind peat moss,
okay,
and about 1/3 pathway or walk-on bark, and mix those all 3 together, that's going to give you the perfect mix for blueberries or for most container plants in general.
So
these little bushel and berry varieties would do great,
right?
In that same mix.
And it sounds a little daunting, but the way I do it at home, I get a wheelbarrow get a bag of nice organic potting soil, set that there, bag of peat moss, and a bag of pathway bark or even orchid bark, orchid bark. You know, you get this container, scoop one, scoop the other, mix it up. You're ready to go.
Absolutely.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah,
So,
it really is. It's not complicated at all, and it makes the perfect mix. There are almost equivalent mixes that you can buy pre-mixed or pre-bagged, but I really like being able to mix those three elements together and come up with that finished product.
right. So what we're saying is if you're new to gardening, a little intimidated, don't be. Great starter plants, blueberries. If you want to expand and maybe get a blackberry in your, patio or a raspberry in your patio, look into the bushel and berry line of plants. What's nice about ours is ours in little 4-inch containers, right? So they're inexpensive at your garden center. Put in a nice pickle jar, decorative pot, use the planting mix, and you're going to have fruit throughout the summer. So, hopefully this kind of helps people who are a little intimidated understand it's simple. And gardening really is simple.
And so rewarding. I mean, we were picking blueberries this year beginning about maybe March 15th, and we picked all the way up until last week, first week in August.
Yep. So just go to our harvest chart, pick a early, mid, late season blueberry, and you're set.
And even though all those blueberry varieties are listed as being self-fruitful, by planting 3 individual varieties together
Just helps
in
with the
one
production.
clump, you get so much more production, probably 10 times the amount of production by having those cross-pollinators built in.
Yep. So any other questions, just go on to davewilson.com and, just look at the varieties and make the choice. Go down to your independent garden center and pick them out.
And we're here for you. We want your gardening experience to be successful. We want you to eat plenty of fresh fruit. And that's why we're providing these high quality plants and all this information on our website.
That again from Dave Wilson Nursery, Tom Spellman and Phil Purcell talking berries. And for more information, do check out their website, davewilson.com. We're talking with Master Gardener Shenna Mealy. And Shenna, this is quite the system you have here. You have your blueberries spaced here, about 3 to 4 feet apart?
Yes.
And when people come here to the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center and see the blueberries, they're going to be amazed at your netting system here. Talk about this netting system. It's a system anybody could put in at home.
Right. It's very simple. If you don't net your blueberries, the birds will eat them before you get to. Blueberries turn blue about a week before they're actually ripe, but as soon as they turn blue, the birds will eat them gone. So if you want to protect them and have some yummy ones left for yourself, you need to net them. What we have done is we have PVC pipe that's about 4 or 5 feet tall with a T at the top. And then that PVC pipe is actually over a piece of rebar. The rebar is in the ground. It's about a 4-foot piece of rebar. We poke in the ground about 18 inches. The PVC pipe goes over that. A string has gone around through the PVC pipe T's.
At the top.
At the top, yes. And then the netting is over that. So it's really just a support for the netting.
Yeah, that string, we should point out, is actually like a white nylon rope.
Right. And it could be anything. It could be yellow. It could, whatever. This year we actually painted our PVC pipe green, so it's a little less obtrusive, and it actually looks really fabulous.
And it's half-inch PVC pipe, too.
Yes.
So that's very inexpensive.
Very and easy to do, something that anybody can do with a little, saw and a spray paint if you want. Then the netting that we can buy locally is not as wide, and it's kind of stiff and not as easy to work with. So we have netting that we found. Can I say where we get it from?
Sure, oh yeah.
It's actually Wilson Orchard and Vineyard Supply, might be saying that backwards, has netting available. The netting that they have currently available is black, but it's also soft. It's wonderful to work with. It comes in 50-foot wide amounts, so you can have a big spanse, and they will cut it to size. So that's the best resource we've found around here to get your netting, and they do mail order. So then the other part that's essential is you have to pin the netting down to the ground, because those sneaky birds will actually climb under the netting, eat your berries, break your leaves, trying to fly out. They won't be able to fly out, and then they'll just kill themselves and die. So we don't want that to happen. And consequently, we have used hose. You can use anything, actually. PVC pipe, old wood, something to secure the base of the netting around the entire side. We pin that down with irrigation clamps, and that keeps it so that the birds cannot get in.
So are these the longer bobby pins, about the 6-inch or 8-inch?
Yes. Yep. They're like 1 inch wide enough to go over a big hose, and about 6 inches long.
Yeah, so basically you just have like a 100-foot garden hose along the base of the perimeter and then pinned it down, and that holds the netting in place so squirrels or dogs or whatever and birds can't get underneath it to get the berries. My question is, how do you get in?
You have to lift it up. You have to unpin it. You have to lift up the netting from under the hose. The netting then just kind of flops up over the supports, and you pick underneath there and then put it back down.
What section opens up? How wide a section do you have open up?
It depends on how many berries are. I mean, you can open up, even the whole side if you want to can be opened up. We usually open up maybe, 6 or 10 feet at a time. Just depending on how many berries are ripening, which bushes need attention at that time.
Well, Shanna, I've learned a lot here. Thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
What are the healthiest foods you can grow to reduce the chances of developing metabolic disorders? The Mayo Clinic defines this as a cluster of conditions that occur together, increasing your risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. Culprits could include clogged arteries, elevated blood sugar levels, stress, and more, all things that can lead to heart disease. To put it simply, you need to grow a heart-healthy garden. And what are those foods you can plant that are best suited to help reverse what might be going on around your ticker? We talk with Dr. Laura Varich, she's the fresh physician, about those foods that can do you a world of good. It's the Heart Healthy Garden. The Heart Healthy Garden. It's a topic that's close to my heart, literally. After being diagnosed with 4 cholesterol-jammed heart arteries way back when in March 2012, I underwent quadruple coronary artery bypass graft surgery, cabbage as the surgeons like to call it, back in April of 2012. And by the way, at the same time as they're wheeling me into the operating room, they were saying, oh, by the way, did we tell you you have full-blown type 2 diabetes with an A1C of 10.4? Oh, well, thank you. The surgery went well, though, and the long road to healing from heart disease and diabetes began. And I have to tell you, a shout out to cardiac rehabilitation nurses. They do a fabulous job of curing you. Doctors tend to fix things. Rehab nurses tend to cure you. And I had an excellent cardiac rehab nurse who showed me the way of eating correctly, of eating the right foods. And it was a big help to where I have ended up, 60 pounds lighter. The arteries that now service my heart are still cholesterol-free. Blood sugar levels can be a challenge sometimes because sometimes life just gets in the way, but I've figured out basically how to bring them back down. And I'll be glad to share that with you today. Also sharing with us today is Dr. Laura Varich, and she is the fresh physician who truly believes that you can make yourself a lot better if you just eat right and give up ultra-processed foods and eat the healthiest food possible. And as you know, favorite saying of mine these days is the healthiest food you can eat is the food you grow yourself. So this sounds like a match made in heaven. Dr. Laura Varich, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Fred. So glad to be back. And you're right. The healthiest food that we can eat is what we grow. No doubt about it.
It is more flavorful, for one thing. It is certainly more convenient, and it's darn more nutritious than store-bought food. But if that's all you can get, I would suggest a farmer's market as your first alternative, and then the supermarket as the second one. And growing your own food, it's not cheap. It's not easy, but the not easy part is good exercise. You can burn up to 7 calories a minute out in the garden working, so there's that. And as I'm also fond of saying, shut your mouth and move your feet. I like the way you put it. Basically, you can eat your way to health.
Yes, that is absolutely true. my journey into being certified in lifestyle medicine, now speaking to people and educating people on their health through nutrition, mostly through lifestyle, but mostly through nutrition, shows us that we can prevent disease, we can halt disease, we can even reverse a lot of these chronic diseases that we have. So that is pretty amazing.
Talk a little bit about your journey to where you were and where you are now, because a lot of it is personal in regards to your own health, but a lot of it too is what you were seeing as a clinician. And it's like, yeah, there's something strange going on when young people are coming down with diseases that used to be the purview of older people.
Exactly. And that's really what got me looking into this, because I spent my career as a pediatric radiologist. So I was out there at Stanford, and that's when I first ran into your work and became a listener. And then we moved out here to Florida. It became very obvious over my career that the health of kids changed very, very dramatically. Even just in the last 10 years, it was obvious that I was seeing all kinds of disease that kids never had. If we saw a case, we'd say, this is weird. And now we were seeing it every day. And one of those things was that really struck me was autoimmune diseases, because that we have a lot of it in my family. I have it too. And the inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are very big in my family. And to see kids being diagnosed with those now at sort of the age of 6 and 7, that's a very hard life for those people. Those are tough diseases. So I started to look into that and what it was all about. And when I did, I saw that it really is about our lifestyle and primarily about our diet. I decided at that point to leave my practice and start just letting people know that there's so much we can do. And that's when I got my lifestyle certification. So I'm very, very passionate about this work. I think we all need to know that we have a lot of power over all this.
All you got to do is eat as many natural whole foods as possible. It's so very true. It's amazing, though, how the quality of life has really worsened for ourselves and our families. In your website, freshphysician.com, you point out that the development of 10 of the top 15 major diseases affecting Americans today include things like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol levels, and, of course, the 2 leading causes of death, heart disease and cancer. And that is the unintended consequence of a Western diet that is heavy on ultra-processed food and not too big on eating fresh food.
Yes, absolutely. That is correct. Yeah, this epidemic of overweight, obesity, and chronic disease that we're seeing now really began back in sort of the 1940s or so. These diseases really started escalating, and that was at the time that really these ultra-processed and convenience foods came on the market. And now we know that about 70% of our diet in America is ultra-processed foods. What's an ultra-processed food? Those packaged convenience foods with the long list of ingredients. The thing that really tips me off is if it has a long list of herbs and spices in it, I'm happy with that. But if it's a long list of ingredients of things that you have never heard of before, you don't know what they are, you wouldn't find them in your kitchen, that's an ultra-processed food. And of course, it includes our junk food, our fast food, all that stuff. But it's amazing that 70% of our diet in America is these foods now. And so this is where our health has really been put in jeopardy.
And unfortunately, fast food, it's certainly not cheap, and it's not getting any cheaper, that's for sure. But it's convenient. And I think people are so stressed for time that they option for that instead of cooking a meal. But there have to be easier ways. There has to be easier ways to consume healthier food. And that's been one of the tenets of your website, freshphysician.com, because you include a lot of recipes.
Right. I include recipes, a lot of recipes on there. And what I've really done is try to make them as healthful as possible. One of the main ideas there is to keep the saturated fat low and the sodium low. So those are a couple of the main things that we need to be watching out for in our diets. And also to make them simple, because like you said, they need to be simple. And there's lots and lots of ways to simplify the making of meals, like batch cooking ahead of time. We need to get a bigger freezer maybe, but we can do a lot of cooking ahead of time and then storing some for future. There's lots of ways we can do it we have lost the art of cooking. It's sort of going to be going back to some of the traditional ways that we used to cook and the things that we used to eat. That's sort of the way to think about it. But there are lots of ways to make it more simple, and we do need to make it part of our life, because otherwise we pay the price in the time we're going to spend later in the hospital and the doctor's office, and the money we're going to spend on medicines and all these things. So it's important to start spending a little time and give food the respect it deserves. It's the only fuel of our body.
And eating as healthy as possible, as often as possible, it can be achieved. And it's not a diet. It goes right to your title, lifestyle. It's not a diet.
Right. And I love the way that you said that, because what I try to tell people is that it's really important to just have your goal in mind and to keep moving that direction and just to do the very best you can. There is no perfection, and this isn't a diet, like you said, because it isn't that if you ate something bad today that, wasn't on your healthy food list, that you're done and you have to quit and I just can't do it. This is too hard. You just start eating healthier again at the next meal, right? And it's just going to be, this is how life goes. Things get in our way and maybe trip us up, but we just keep getting back on track and just keep trying to do better, having more of those whole plant foods. That's what we're looking for.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, I have this big whiteboard with sticky notes on it. There's something like 50 sticky notes on it just to inspire me to keep eating right and to keep exercising. And the number one sticky note on there in the upper left-hand corner says, write it down. And that is so important for helping you keep on the track you're on. When you use a program like MyFitnessPal or Calorie King or even just a notebook, writing down what you eat, and what's beautiful about the computer programs is they keep track of the calories, they keep track of the protein, they keep track of the carbohydrates, the sugar, the fiber, and all of that to help you say, whoa, I better slow down here with the cookies. It really works to get you to lose weight. And that's just a habit to develop that you do day in, day out. And the beauty of writing it down, when you flip the page, when you go to tomorrow, it's a blank slate. It's a brand new day. You're starting perfectly.
Oh, I really, really like that. What a great idea. You're right, because every day we need to look at that. Maybe every meal we need to look at that as a blank slate. We're starting over. We can start fresh and do better and better and better.
Yeah, we're human, and we're going to be, chowing down sometimes when we shouldn't be. But again, the words on the paper or the words on the computer can help you dial back a little bit. And of course, there's always exercise. Do you subscribe to the belief that you can consume more calories in a day the more you exercise?
Well, I guess you could look at it that way. You could also look at it as you get you could lower your total calories for the day by getting some exercise. But one thing we know for sure is we cannot out-exercise a bad diet, right? It takes a lot to burn off 100 or 200 calories. That's a big, long workout, right? And we can eat that in 1 minute, 2 minutes. We really have to focus on, especially if we're talking about weight loss, we have to focus on what's going in. Exercise is critical for our health, no doubt about it. Keeps our vessels flexible and strong to allow the blood flow to our organs, prevents, everything, heart disease and Alzheimer's disease and stroke and all these other things. So exercise is critical. Weight loss, it is not going to be the key. The key is going to be what goes in our mouth.
Exactly. And what it's doing to the inside to help your body help itself. It's amazing what we're learning about the biome, the microbiome, and what's going on in our gut and all the good things that can happen when you eat right. In your latest newsletter called Making Heart Choices, where you talk about heart health being the number one cause of death in our country, the good news is that even though the primary cause, which is a buildup of cholesterol in our blood vessels, develops over decades, we can halt the progression and even reverse this process. And you introduce us to a new word called phytosterols. What are phytosterols?
Yeah, phytosterols are a really interesting chemical substance. Phyto means plant. Phytosterols are plant sterols. it is a version, the plant's version of what is the animal type of cholesterol. So what's really neat about phytosterols is that when we eat phytosterols and they come in our plant foods, we are going to actually be able to block cholesterol from being taken up into our bloodstream from our intestinal tract. And the really great thing about this is that it blocks both the cholesterol coming from our food, as well as the cholesterol our own body is making. Our body makes a lot of cholesterol. 70% of the cholesterol that we have circulating in our bloodstream has actually come from our body itself. And our body makes all that it needs. All the cholesterol it needs is made by our body. Anything extra we take in is extra cholesterol, and that's what can cause so many problems with heart disease. But about 70% is what our body makes itself. So if we eat these phytosterols, they actually block that cholesterol our own body made and puts into our intestine, which would then be reabsorbed up back into our body later on, blocks that even from getting taken up. So it really can, these phytosterols really can lower our cholesterol. And this is why plant foods are so important for being able to lower cholesterol. They actually block the uptake. The other thing about plant foods is they have a lot of fiber, and fiber actually hides some of those components like cholesterol and some of the fats and even some of the sugars in our food, and carries it out of our bodies. So we have these couple things working for us from plant foods that help to lower our cholesterol. And you can see why, if we're not eating a lot of plant foods and we're eating more ultra-processed foods and more animal foods, our cholesterol is going to go up.
In my old blog page, the Farmer Fred Rant, I wrote years and years ago about the Heart Healthy Garden, and it was based on the crops that you can grow in your backyard garden that have the most soluble fiber. A lot of people think of fiber as just something that helps keep you regular, and that's insoluble fiber. But soluble fiber is part of fiber. It's a type of fiber that dissolves in water to form a gel-like material. I know the Mayo Clinic has studied this extensively, and soluble fiber can help lower blood cholesterol levels by reducing the LDL, the low-density lipoprotein, or the bad cholesterol levels. And soluble fiber has other heart health benefits, such as lowering blood pressure, blood glucose levels, and inflammation. Going back to my big whiteboard of inspiration, another sticky note that says, eat more fiber, eat less sugar. And when you eat more fiber, it's probably going to have some soluble fiber in it, which a lot of plants do have, that is going to reverse the cholesterol buildup in your body and lower your A1C numbers if you're a diabetic. And I'm living proof of it here 12 years later that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that soluble fiber is really important. Yeah, most plant foods, really all plant foods, contain both the soluble and the insoluble types. So yeah, anytime you're eating plant foods, you're getting some soluble fiber. There are some particular foods that are really good and really high in soluble fiber, and those are going to be our whole grains, right? And we think of oats because we've heard about oats over and over again for heart health. And this is one of the reasons. They have a lot of soluble fiber in them, but other whole grains also. Our legumes, our beans and peas and chickpeas, lentils, those have a lot of soluble fiber also. But really, you're getting some in almost any plant food you eat. So you just need to get more of those in.
Yeah, whole grain can be kind of a deceiving title because in some cases, whole grain is not whole grain. I've gotten into the habit of buying my bread, not from the bread aisle, but from the freezer section, because I know that must contain some sort of living critters that are better for you as opposed to what's sitting on a shelf for who knows how long. And that is the true whole grain is maybe the bread that you would find in the freezer section.
Yeah, I like that tip a lot. And I also have another tip for your readers because I think a lot of people are very confused about this whole grain thing. Harvard Medical School put out a guideline for us not that long ago that is really helpful. If you have a whole grain bag in your hand, say you have my favorite whole grain oat groats. You have that in your hand. That is a whole grain. You don't have to worry about its proportion of things. But so that's a whole grain product. But if you have a bread or a pasta, everybody wants to advertise that it's whole grain because we're thinking about that. But is it really a whole grain product, or is there just a little bit of whole grains in it? The way that they talked about figuring this out is a really helpful and easy to remember. Is if you look at the label, what you're looking for is the carbohydrate to fiber ratio within that food being 10-1 or even more of the fiber. So carbohydrates 10 to fiber 1. So you can compare those two on your label and just see how much fiber it has, because that's what a whole grain would have, a 10-1 ratio.
Oh, that's a great tip. All right. The 10-1 carbo to fiber ratio. I like that.
Yeah.
That can help us out a lot when shopping. Bring your magnifying glass with you when you go to the store to start reading the small print on those labels. And it's really ticking me off that some products now are saying, you want more information? Here, scan this code and go to the website. No, I want the information right there on the bag.
I agree with you. Who has time for that?
Yeah. You brought up a point earlier, that a good shopping point, and that is that a lot of the ultra-processed foods are in colorful packages. And so if you just shop the perimeter of a supermarket and avoid all those aisles with the colorful packages, you can find a lot of healthier food, usually on the edges, maybe not the fresh vegetables and fruits, which tend to be towards the middle. I mean, if you can, just try to stay in that section. But where you got the fresher foods along the edge that are usually refrigerated, and that is a healthier sign that there's stuff in there that has a limited lifespan and it's better for you.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. The foods that you're going to want to get more of are all along the perimeter. Now, if you do wander into those middle aisles, though, read your labels, because it can be pretty amazing the difference in some different products that we might find. Some might have just tons of chemicals and emulsifiers and things in them, and others right next to it may have just only a few ingredients. So it's really important just to take a look at those labels. And one of the main things, especially if we're talking about heart health, but really we're finding out as sort of in general for health, we want to lower our saturated fat intake. That's probably the best thing we can do for our health, preventing Alzheimer's disease, stroke, cancer, heart disease, on, is to lower the saturated fat intake. So really look at that on your labels. And we want to keep saturated fat levels down, as low as we can, really. So I compare products and try to find the ones with the lower saturated fat. A lot of products are putting it in because it gives things the saturated fat gives things a kind of buttery taste, right? Butter has a lot of saturated fat in it. And so they'll add some oils with a lot of saturated fat to get us to feel like this is a really delicious product.
It's one reason I like to use the MyFitnessPal food guide on the computer to keep track of what I'm eating, because you can follow at a glance up to 6 different categories of nutrients that you're trying to either limit or increase. And I'm following calories, sugar, fiber, sodium, protein, and saturated fat. And I always try to make sure that in the summary of the day, at the bottom of the page, that the amount of saturated fat that I have consumed is less than the daily goal. The daily goal isn't that much. For me, it's like 38 grams of saturated fat, and I just keep it under that.
Oh, that's a smart way to do that. Yeah, then you can really keep your eye on it.
I don't think we can discount exercise in helping you get back on the road to wellness. And it doesn't have to be severe exercise. Now, some would say I'm an athlete. I am not an athlete. I'm just a guy that likes to ride my bike. And I do ride my bicycle about 100 miles a week. Usually it's over 100 miles a week. And I think that's what basically delayed me from having serious heart issues until I was in my 60s. But like you said, you can't out-exercise a bad diet. But with exercise, though, you are burning up that cholesterol, that sugar, and other things, and just what it does for you mentally. And I have found one key in the last year or so that has really helped me out, because I have decided that, okay, it's fine to ride your bike 100 miles a week, but maybe include a little workout within that workout to be even better for you. And that's where high intensity interval training comes in. And there was a book I was reading called The 1 Minute Workout that talked about a Scandinavian interval training program that was researched by doctors at Norwegian University of Science and Technology that found that a 4-minute 60% effort followed by a 3-minute 30% effort repeated 4 times can do so much good for you. And it doesn't matter what age you are. And in fact, they found it specifically very helpful, that 4-3-4, if you will, for sedentary middle-aged patients to avoid diseases. Cardiac rehabilitation patients would work out just fine with this exercise program, the 4-3-4. They call it the Norwegian workout. And they found that not only did it trigger improvements in athletes, but they've done studies to numerous other populations, including those who with cardiovascular disease and the overweight. And in one 2008 study at this same Norwegian Institute, they applied the protocol to this group of middle-aged men and women with metabolic syndrome, which is a precursor to heart disease, stroke, and diabetes, and had them repeat this 4-3-4 3 times a week for 16 weeks. And the format was able to actually reverse the symptoms of metabolic syndrome. In fact, the interval group increased their VO2 max, which is a critical marker of health, by 35%, which was more than twice as much that the group that performed continuous moderate exercise. So it really has a lot of benefits in sedentary people who want to reverse the risk of metabolic syndrome. And again, it was called the Norwegian. And the book, again, is entitled The 1 Minute Workout by Martin Jabala, who is a researcher. And I just wanted to get that plug in there for the benefits of thinking about adding interval training to whatever you're doing, even if all you're doing is walking. If you just walk where you are going for 4 minutes at 60% of perceived effort, followed by 3 minutes at 30% effort, and you repeat that 4 times, you're going to feel better.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to get that book. I'm going to definitely check that one out. I started adding some interval training to my workouts not that far back, maybe a year or so ago. I find it so much more fun too. It makes the workout so much more interesting.
Yeah, it does. And actually, I feel better after doing that. It just gave me a peace of mind, which is the other benefit of exercise. It clears your mind. I have a cycling jersey that says, bicycling is cheaper than therapy. It sure is, despite the increasing price of bicycles. It just clears your head out and makes you a happier person.
Yes, for sure. And the price of bicycles goes up, but so does the price of therapy, doesn't it?
Well, that, yeah. And medical care, too.
Yes.
Don't blame yourself, folks, if you are suffering with these diseases, because a lot of it, I really believe it's the addictive nature of things like sugar, salt, and fats that you just want more and more of it. And for whatever reason, there isn't enough, I don't think, good research and publicity about the addictive nature of certain food ingredients. To me, right now, the big bugaboo in my life are potato chips, because like the old TV commercial used to say, you can't just eat one. You can't.
Exactly. Well, there is a lot of information actually about this out there. There was an expose called Craving the Cookie. I think it was back in, I don't know the exact year. It might have been as far back as 2005 or 2009 or something like that, in the Chicago Tribune. And they basically exposed the food companies for what they were doing, which was brain research on people to try to figure out what flavor combinations were going to make our brains addicted to a food. So feeling like I need more, the typical addiction type of behaviors. I need more. I can't get enough. I'm thinking about it all the time. And that combination was sugar, fat, and salt.
Yeah.
Now, sugar, fat, and salt in nature do not come together in any food package. So it is well known that this combination makes our brain go a little bit haywire, because those are the things that through evolution our bodies have craved, because they have, the high calories or the nutrients that we need. So our brains know we need these, and they were hard to find. They were very hard to find back in the days when we were hunting and gathering, right? So when they come together in a food, our brain just goes crazy. And our brain thinks this is the best thing ever. And so, yes, it is hard to stop ourselves from eating that. Now, the best thing to do is to taper yourself off of those things, and you'll see that the cravings will decrease with time. You start to crave other things. I've noticed I crave now a lot of legumes. Who would have thought? Yeah, those foods are really addicted, and they're designed that way.
The beauty of legumes, beans, chickpeas, snow peas, they're easy to grow at home. And you can grow them, depending on your climate, you can grow some of them year round. And it's just a great addition to your diet. It helps to have somebody in the house who is ticked off, in my case, at all the plants I grow, all the food plants I grow, and saying, well, what are we going to do with these? I guess I better come up with some recipes. So my wife, God bless her, makes it her goal to cook a normal-sized meal. I think that's key, too, in this age of restaurants that serve meals on platters. To have a dinner that is only 400 or 500 calories, but is composed primarily of food from the garden.
Yes, this is food that is what we call high nutrient density. So a lot of nutrients in there per calorie that's there. If we start eating a lot more of those whole foods that, again, have that fiber we were talking about, and they contain a lot of water naturally in those foods, right? Those are the things that are free. There's no calories in fiber or water, and they fill us up greatly. So those are the two most satisfying things you could have in your food. They make you feel the most full, and they have no calories. So those are the things we're missing in our ultra-processed foods. That's what's been removed. The fiber and the water are taken out. And so we get a really high calorie density in those foods, whereas our whole foods have this nutrient density, tons of nutrients in not very many calories, and we feel satisfied.
Yeah, getting back to fiber, it's amazing how fiber can suppress the appetite, too. What is also sad is how little the average American eats as far as fiber goes. I've read some figures that the average American might eat 15 grams of fiber per day when the recommended minimum is 30. And if you eat over 30 grams of fiber, by the way, don't do it all at once, kids. Just work your way up to increasing the amount of fiber. When you get to over 30, it really helps the gut biome process more of the good food and get rid of the bad food.
Yes, you're exactly right. 15 grams of fiber per day is what Americans are eating now. And it's recommended somewhere 30 to 35. But truly, some groups will recommend we get to 50. And we know that our ancestors, those same hunter-gatherer ancestors, were eating 150 grams of fiber a day. So our body is used to having a lot more fiber. Where does fiber come from? Only plant foods, only whole plant foods, right? Those ultra-processed foods, most of the fiber is taken out. Animal foods don't have any fiber at all. So it's all coming from those whole plant foods, which, again, we need to get more of. In America, that's 5% of our diet right now is these whole plant foods. So we need to get more of those in. And that fiber, you're so right. We're learning so much about the microbiome right now because it seems to be associated. It's products that it creates, that microbiome, those bacteria in our gut. The products that they create seem to be related to health of almost every organ that we have. So there's a lot of research in that right now. And it's really just gone, exponentially up, the amount of research on the microbiome. And what we know is the microbiome eats fiber. That is the food of the microbiome. Why? In our small intestine, we absorb all the nutrients that we can absorb, and we can't absorb fiber. So our bacteria are mostly in our colon, our large intestine. So the fiber that we didn't absorb gets down to them, and then they can use it. So we're living kind of symbiotically with them, right? We're giving them a home, we're feeding them. And what they do is they break that fiber down, and they just pump out these amazing chemicals for our health. Short chain fatty acids, they actually make these anti-inflammatory components that are so good for us. And then they also alter a bunch of those phytonutrients, those plant nutrients we know of, and make them usable for our bodies too. So they're doing a lot down there. They're not just hanging out down there, taking it easy. They're working hard for us.
I think we better get in some nitty gritties. We're going to be on all sorts of scenic bypasses here. And knowing my audience, they want specifics. So let me start with a little list of my favorite high fiber backyard crops to grow, which include artichokes, which is so pretty. I have it growing in the front yard. Blueberries. We have shell beans, of course, all the pinto beans, the black turtle beans, navy peas, great northern beans, kidney beans, apricots, and just about any tree fruit for that matter. Green peas, of course, are excellent, especially the sugar snap peas. Raisins, avocados, carrots, eggplant, oranges, pears, peaches, strawberries, leeks, green beans, cabbage, cauliflower, peppers, potatoes, peanuts, asparagus, celery, spinach, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, thank you, apples, melons, broccoli, corn, lettuce, walnuts, olives, cucumbers, onions, radishes, zucchini. Yeah, just stuff you would normally grow in your backyard is all very healthy food. And you have a little section there on your latest newsletter about heart-healthy foods and the phytosterol content of nuts, that nuts are so good for you.
Yeah, of all the foods that we can eat, nuts are the highest in those phytosterols. Again, those ones that will block cholesterol from being taken up into our system. So super healthy for us. And we know actually that nuts are the number one food for heart health. So we need to get more nuts in our diet. And the highest of the nuts, the highest in those phytosterols are pistachios. They have quite a bit of those phytosterols in them. So they're particularly good, kind of followed by almonds and pecans and walnuts. And cashews. And yeah, so nuts are really, really great for our heart health. Now, when we talk about nuts, we're talking about all the research studies that have shown that nuts are great for our heart tell us that we should have a small handful of nuts every day. You know, I like to get the variety of my plant foods up every day. There's a recommendation that we get at least 30 different plant foods every week for our microbiome. So that's a fun game to play. Try to get to 30 per week of different types of plant foods. So maybe with our nuts that we could have a small handful of a mixture of nuts. That would be great. But a small handful means your palm, a palmful, right? Not like your hand is completely overflowing with nuts, but like a small palmful of nuts every day is what's recommended for our heart health.
Yeah, you mentioned in the newsletter pistachios, almonds, pecans, walnuts, and cashews. Cashews are a tropical nut, very difficult to grow here. In fact, you can't. They're imported. If you live in certain areas of the country, like if you're in California, you can grow pistachios, almonds, and walnuts. A lot of the country can grow pecans. So if you're looking for, and you have the room for a 50-foot pecan tree, go for it. Do that. I like to choose almonds for my healthy nut because as I pick them up out of the can, I can count them with my fingertips, and I know that 21 almonds make one serving. So I can keep track of that as I pop them into my mouth.
Yeah, the thing we probably don't want to do is sit down on the couch watching TV with a big bag of nuts near us. That's probably we're going to end up eating way too many. They're so delicious and they're easy to eat. It's interesting that I think a lot of people don't eat nuts because they think, well, that's a really high fat food. I want to avoid that food. But the thing about nuts is that they are, like I said, they're so good for our heart health. They cut the risk of heart attack in half, and they cause a 30% decrease in the amount of the number of strokes that people have. So they're really, really great for our cardiovascular health. They've got the good kind of fats in them. They've got a lot of those polyunsaturated fats in them. And when we actually have research that has shown us that when people are asked to add a handful of nuts a day to their diet, they actually don't gain weight over time. Their weight is the same as the people in the control group or even lower. So nuts are very satisfying for us too. So it's not that they're going to cause weight gain. We do need to get these into our diet.
And of course, fruits and vegetables and whole grains are part of that heart-healthy diet as well. In fruits and vegetables, you mentioned the ones with the most phytosterols include corn, broccoli, lettuce, Brussels sprouts, and blueberries. Most of us can grow all those at one time or another during the growing year in your backyard. I have been on a search for a bolt-resistant lettuce, and you gave me that tip last year when we talked last June in, I believe it was episode 269, about healthy diet. You said you need to try the Chinese cabbage, the Tokyo Bakana Chinese cabbage. It is bolt resistant. It can take the heat. And I go, well, gee, I'll try that because I've been searching for years for a summertime lettuce, a green that I can grow and have with just about every meal. And sure enough, that Tokyo Bacana Chinese cabbage, which isn't really a cabbage, it's more lettuce-like. It has a crunchy flavor. It's a loose leaf variety. Grow it in the shade in the summertime. Grow it in the winter in full sun. And it is delicious. It grows easily. You can plant a short row every month, and you can cut it, and it comes back. And eventually it wears out, but you can still plant it several times a year. Try it. Thank you so much. And in fact, you even said that. Try it. It's a game changer. And it really is for anybody searching for a bolt-resistant, leafy green that can take the heat. Try that Tokyo Bacana Chinese cabbage.
Yeah, and you get a nice big head of that growing, and you could just cut off the outer leaves, like you said, and keep it going and keep it going. And for some reason, the cabbage pests don't seem to like it that much. I haven't had trouble with them, whereas I have trouble with some of the other cabbages. Another one I want to tip you off to, in case you haven't tried it, is one called devil's ear lettuce. Have you tried that?
No. Okay, I'm writing it down. Devil's ear lettuce.
That's another one that I feel like it goes a lot longer before bolting than the rest of them. And it's kind of got a long skinny leaf. It's a smallish, kind of makes a smallish head of a long skinny leaf. It's a loose leaf. And it's got some purple on the edges. Super wonderful, very nice flavor. And it doesn't bolt, at least not for a long time. So I love that about it.
They've done some trials out at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center, the Sacramento County Master Gardener Demonstration Garden. And they, one summer, did try a lot of different heat-tolerant lettuce, or allegedly heat-tolerant lettuces. And their final verdict was, well, they're barely heat-tolerant. And they included things like black-seeded Simpson, Amish, deer tongue, Red Cross, Jericho, year-round bronze, and a dark red leaf lettuce called Paradai, Paradai, which is a red oak leaf lettuce. And also they tested Nevada, which is a green loose leaf. And it's kind of a semi-heading type. Again, they did as well as expected in summer heat, but as expected means, well, it might get you to August, but that's about it. So you think devil's ear lettuce can last through August?
Oh, I don't know if I'd say that, but
okay.
But it seems to go longer than the rest of mine as far as before it bolts.
All right. Well, I will definitely pick up some devil's ear lettuce and give that a try this summer and see how it does.
Great.
Because greens, let's talk a little bit about greens. They're so good for you. And they're low calorie. And you can serve them in a variety of ways. You can serve them raw in a salad. You can saute them. You can mix it up in stir fries. There's just so much you can do with greens.
Yeah, and they really probably are, if you think about healthy foods, they're probably our number one healthy food. They have the most nutrients, again, that nutrient density that we were talking about. So yeah, greens are terrific for us. And some of the things that are really, really good for us in the foods that we eat, I know we talked about this a little bit before, the strong colors and the strong flavors in our food. And greens have both of those things going for them. Those dark green colors are really a combination of colors. It's a whole smattering of colors that's making that dark green. So they've got a lot of phytonutrients there, and they do have some of those stronger flavors, right? Some of that bitterness to it and things like that. That tells us that there's a lot of those really good phytonutrients in there. So yeah, greens, we can do so much with them, and it's just a matter of finding the ones that you really love.
You mentioned different colored foods. I remember years ago, this is probably 30 years ago, a local supermarket chain hired a dietitian to go around and give little talks about eat a colorful diet, about eating different colored foods and how good it is for you. I just have a funny feeling she was just a little ahead of her time because not too many people were paying attention to what she said. It was intriguing to me. I think time has bore her message out.
Yes, absolutely. And now her wisdom has become a little saying called "Eat the Rainbow," and so they teach this to kids now. Eat the rainbow as a way of inspiring them to sort of eat and try all different colors of foods. But yeah, again, each of those colors is telling us about different nutrients in that food, and we know we need them all. The more nutrients, different types of nutrients we're getting in, the more we can affect all the different disease processes that might be happening in our body. So yeah, getting all kinds of different colored foods in, really important. And I don't mean colored like your bag of M&Ms, those colors.
I was going to bring that up, yes.
But your colors in your natural foods, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, probably while we were talking about it, that was the image that most people had in their brain.
Maybe it's that time of day. I don't know. But
yeah, I'm trying to think of any healthy ingredient in an M&M. I'm not sure there is.
Well, get the peanut ones, and then you've got the peanut.
Okay, yeah. Now, talk a little bit about peanuts. Peanuts are actually a healthy nut, and they're the least expensive nut that you can buy.
Yeah, they're so interesting because they really have, they're a legume, actually, right? They're a type of legume, the peanuts. So it's different than sort of tree nuts and things. And they happen to have, sort of the same healthy benefits of nuts that we're talking about, like tree nuts for heart health, but they also have a lot of the qualities that you might find in like a bean. And so they are really good for us. I think we just have to be careful again, especially if we're watching our weight, not to eat huge amounts. And it's really much better to eat the whole nuts rather than, say, peanut butter. Peanut butter is delicious. We've sort of broken down some of the fiber components. It's the fiber's still in there, but we can digest it all so much more easily. Makes it a little less healthy for us than, say, the whole nuts, where the fiber really slows the transit down through our gut.
Speaking of slowing the transit down, when it comes to nuts, eating nuts in the shell takes a lot of time, but it can really cut down the amount that you put in your mouth. And I'm thinking of peanuts and pistachios.
Yeah, and that's fun that way, right?
Messy, but fun, yes. That's important. Cholesterol can be reversed. We've found that out. What are some of your favorite foods for lowering cholesterol?
Oh, great question. Well, okay, so we talked about nuts and whole grains. Those are a couple big ones that are really good, and legumes. Those are probably the top. But there are a couple that some research has shown can be extremely helpful for lowering our cholesterol, actually working better than are those cholesterol lowering statins. They actually have more effect than those even do. I'd say the top one of those is a seed called black seed. It is used a lot in sort of the Middle East and India, and it's also called black cumin. Its name is Nigella sativa. You could find it online. You can find it a lot of places now. But what we can do is that we have to grind these seeds to get the value out of them so that they're digested. But a quarter teaspoon of this ground black seed a day in this research study, and there's been multiple of them, showed as much as a 30% lowering of LDL cholesterol. That is an amazing number right there. 30% lowering of LDL cholesterol. And it also lowered people's blood triglyceride levels. Another one I love, ground flaxseed. I think in general, everybody should be having this in their diet. So again, it's a seed that we're grinding, right, to get to be able to absorb it. If you add as much as, in these people, up to 4 tablespoons a day, they had a 15% lowering of their LDL cholesterol. And so those are some things that I try to add into my diet every single day. Really good for that purpose, and have a lot of other health effects too that we don't even have time to go into because they're extensive. So those are a couple of things I would recommend everybody add to their diet.
Do you have to buy the whole seed to get the full benefits and have a grinder as well?
You could probably find these seeds ground. For sure, the flaxseed already comes ground. What I would do in that situation, or really in either, is to keep it in the refrigerator, keep the seeds in the refrigerator so that they don't spoil. And then, so you can either buy them whole or you can buy them already ground. With the black seed, you can put it into a pepper grinder and just use it like you would pepper. And it has a peppery flavor. You would use it sort of instead of pepper.
Oh.
So you can just put it in a pepper grinder and just keep it on your table.
Yeah. and it's only adding a quarter teaspoon per day to lower your cholesterol, like you said, by up to 30%.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah. If you buy the whole seed, do you have to keep that in the refrigerator, or is just the ground ones you keep in the refrigerator?
I keep them both, but if you don't have room in your refrigerator, because that does take up some space, the whole seed probably, if you buy smaller packages and so that you don't have a lot sitting around for a long period of time, that's probably fine.
And these would be seasonings and easy to apply to any meal.
Exactly. You can easily put those on any meal. And you see with the flaxseed, it doesn't really have any flavor, so it's easy to put in almost everything. The black seed can be a little trickier. Say, my husband doesn't like the taste of it too much. I haven't met many people that didn't like it, but he doesn't like pepper. So what we started doing was just getting those capsules that you can fill yourself. I grind it and then I just put it into some capsules. And I like that better than buying supplements because we know that the supplement industry is completely unregulated. We don't really know what's in our supplements. So I feel like if I buy the whole food and I just put it into some capsules, which is not very hard to do, that I know what's in those.
And the capsule goes down with a glass of water, I would think.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And well, that's interesting. Okay. I like that idea too for those. But he doesn't like the taste of pepper. Does he eat fresh peppers?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's the black pepper. It's not a favorite.
All right. How would you describe the taste? You mentioned that ground black seed is also known as black cumin. So does it have that coriander type flavor?
No, it's actually not related to cumin at all. It's a completely different plant. It's peppery. It has maybe a little bit of a pine taste to it. But it is, I think pleasing. I think it's delicious myself. So I recommend trying it out and see. I think you'll like it.
All right. Pine nuts. I now have visions of Yule Gibbons in my head. All right.
Eat a pine tree. Many parts are edible.
Pine nuts. Yeah. Okay. All right. Tell us a little bit about freshphysician.com. You pointed out that this is your life's work as a lifestyle physician, if you will. There's a crying need for this as opposed to, I won't say opposed to going to a doctor, but doctors don't take many courses in nutrition and diet. And you really need a dietitian in your life or somebody who knows the ins and outs of food.
Yeah, most of us didn't have any real training in nutrition in medical school. Luckily, that's changing a little bit. But even with that, usually people aren't getting a whole lot of that training. So yeah, what I do is sort of to supplement what your doctor does, because I think if you go to your doctor, a lot of times they're not going to know, a lot about the nutritional aspect. It's just not something that we learned in school. So yeah, the website was built to have kind of simple information to try to give people impactful information that they can actually do something about and apply to their lives. Like you said, there's a recipe section, and then I just have a whole bunch of information on there too. Some of it about gardening and the benefits of that. Some of it about different health topics like heart health and brain health and things like that. Just built to try to simplify these ideas for people so that they can apply them to their lives. And we can really all take our health back into our hands.
And we should point out that you have a free newsletter as well.
I do, and I would love it if people would sign up for that. My last one, as you said, was about heart health. And I try to put out a newsletter each month that really my focus every time I write a newsletter is I want people to leave with it thinking, okay, I have something in here that I can just do. I can apply it today to my life. I try to get to the latest research and kind of explain that to people. And so I hope I can reach more people. I'd love it.
And you can sign up for her free newsletter at her homepage. Just scroll down. You'll find the link at freshphysician.com. Dr. Laura Varich, a very enlightening conversation today. So I will be looking at packages of bread that have a carbohydrate to fiber ratio of 10-1. I'm going to lower my saturated fat, eat 30 different plant foods per week, and try devil's ear lettuce.
I love your checklist. That sounds great.
Oh, well, thank you for everything you do, too. And thanks for being on Garden Basics today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure as always.
Okay, here's your garden to-do list for the day. Spend some quiet time in the yard. Walk, converse, smell, and touch all your plants. Enjoy the texture, the aromas, the color combinations, the structure. Admire the naturally amazing artwork of plant leaves. Check both sides of those leaves for eggs or insects. And if you're checking for eggs or bugs on your plant, make sure that they're the bad guys and not the good guys before you shoo them away. Take a seat out there. Watch and listen to the visitors to your yard, from insects to birds to four-footed creatures, some of whom may be of dubious benefit. And if you would please, help spread the word to your gardening friends and family about the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. Leave a thumbs up or a comment on the show at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can do that at our homepage as well, gardenbasics.net. And if you subscribe to our newsletter, leave a comment, share, and a thumbs up as well at the newsletter Beyond the Garden Basics. It's on Substack. You can find a link to all of these in today's show notes. And as always, thanks for listening. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Friday. It's brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics, it's available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, as well as an accurate transcript, visit our website, gardenbasics.net. And thank you so much for listening and your support.